Sarah Martinez walked through the sliding doors of the downtown office building, her heart beating faster than usual. At 28 years old, she had faced many challenges in her life, but today felt different. Today, she was starting her new job as a customer service representative at Henderson Financial Services, one of the most respected firms in the city. The delicate hummingbird tattoo on her left cheek caught the morning sunlight streaming through the tall windows. The intricate design held deep meaning for Sarah. It represented her grandmother's spirit, the woman who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was just 12 years old. Her grandmother always said hummingbirds were messengers between the living and those who had passed on. Getting the tattoo had been Sarah's way of keeping her grandmother close after she lost her battle with cancer 2 years ago. Sarah approached the reception desk where a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled blonde hair looked up from her computer. The woman's friendly smile faltered slightly when she noticed the facial tattoo, but she quickly recovered her professional demeanor. "Good morning. You must be Sarah Martinez. I'm Linda, the office manager." "Welcome to Henderson Financial," Linda said, though her voice carried a subtle chill that hadn't been there moments before. "Thank you. I'm excited to be here," Sarah replied, maintaining her warm smile despite sensing the shift in Linda's attitude. As Linda led her through the office to show her around, Sarah noticed how conversations seemed to quiet as they passed by different departments. Employees would glance up from their desks, their eyes immediately drawn to her tattoo, followed by subtle nudges to coworkers and whispered comments she couldn't quite hear but could certainly feel. "This is the break room," Linda explained, gesturing to a bright space filled with modern furniture and a coffee station. "Most of the team gathers here around 10 for morning coffee. It's a great way to get to know everyone." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. She had always been social and looked forward to making friends with her new colleagues. Her previous job at a small nonprofit had been friendly and accepting, but the pay wasn't enough to cover her student loans and rent in the expensive city. They continued the tour, visiting different departments. In the accounting section, Sarah met Mrs. Richardson, a stern woman in her 50s who barely made eye contact during their introduction. When they reached the marketing department, a young man named Brad looked up from his computer and did a double take when he saw Sarah's tattoo. "Interesting choice," Brad commented with a smirk, not bothering to hide his judgment. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she maintained her composure. "It's a tribute to my grandmother," she explained simply. Brad shrugged and turned back to his screen without another word. Linda cleared her throat awkwardly and quickly moved them along to the next department. The final stop on their tour was Sarah's workstation in the customer service department. Her desk was positioned in an open area with 5 other representatives. As Linda introduced her to the team, Sarah noticed the same pattern: polite but distant greetings, curious stares at her tattoo, and an overall atmosphere of judgment. "You'll be working primarily with phone clients and some email correspondence," Linda explained, as she showed Sarah how to log into the computer system. "Mr. Henderson expects all customer-facing employees to maintain a professional appearance and demeanor at all times." The emphasis on professional appearance wasn't lost on Sarah. She understood the implication. Clearly, her supervisor, Janet, was a woman in her early 40s with short brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses. She seemed kind but cautious as she went through Sarah's training materials. "We serve a very conservative clientele here," Janet mentioned as they reviewed the employee handbook. "Many of our clients are older, traditional business owners and retirees. They expect a certain level of conventionality when they call for assistance." Sarah nodded, feeling a knot forming in her stomach. She had hoped her qualifications and experience would speak louder than her appearance, but it was becoming clear that wouldn't be the case here. During her lunch break, Sarah sat alone in the break room with her homemade sandwich. She could hear a group of employees at the next table discussing weekend plans, but no one invited her to join the conversation. When she tried to contribute to their discussion about a new restaurant that had opened nearby, the group fell silent and quickly dispersed. The afternoon brought her first phone calls with clients. Sarah's warm, professional voice and extensive knowledge of financial products impressed even the most demanding customers. She successfully resolved several complex issues and received praise from multiple callers. For a brief moment, she felt hopeful that her performance would win over her colleagues. However, when she returned from a bathroom break, she overheard a conversation that shattered that hope. Two co-workers were standing near her desk, unaware she was approaching. "Can you believe they hired someone who looks like that?" whispered Michelle, a woman from the processing department. "What were they thinking? Our clients will be horrified if they ever meet her in person." "I heard Mr. Henderson wasn't involved in the hiring decision," replied Tom from accounting. "He's going to flip when he sees her. There's no way she'll last long with that thing on her face." Sarah's heart sank as she realized the depth of prejudice she was facing. These weren't just casual comments about her appearance. Her colleagues genuinely believed her tattoo made her unsuitable for the job, regardless of her qualifications or performance. She spent the rest of the day throwing herself into her work, answering calls with determined professionalism and organizing her desk with meticulous care. Every successfully resolved customer issue felt like a small victory, proof that she belonged there despite what others thought. As the workday ended, Sarah gathered her purse and jacket, preparing to leave. She had survived her first day, but just barely. The constant stares, whispered comments, and obvious judgment had taken their toll on her confidence. Walking toward the elevator, she passed Mr. Henderson's corner office. Through the glass walls, she could see him on a phone call, gesturing animatedly as he spoke. He was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive suit. Sarah had heard he was former military and ran his business with strict discipline and high standards. She wondered what would happen when he finally noticed her tattoo. Based on everything she had experienced today, she feared it would mean the end of her employment at Henderson Financial Services. But Sarah Martinez was not someone who gave up easily. Her grandmother had taught her to be strong in the face of adversity, and she would honor that lesson no matter how difficult the path ahead might be. The second week at Henderson Financial Services proved even more challenging for Sarah than her first day. Word had spread throughout the office about the girl with the face tattoo, and she found herself becoming the subject of increasingly bold commentary. During Monday morning's coffee break, Sarah entered the break room to find several employees gathered around the coffee machine. The conversation stopped abruptly when they noticed her, but she caught the tail end of their discussion. "Completely unprofessional. What message does that send to our clients?" Michelle was saying before she spotted Sarah, and quickly changed the subject to weekend plans. Sarah poured her coffee in silence, feeling the weight of their stares. As she turned to leave, she heard Brad from marketing make a comment that stopped her in her tracks. "I wonder if she has more tattoos hidden under her clothes. You know what they say about people who do that to their faces? They're usually covered in them." The crude implication in his voice made Sarah's hands tremble with anger, but she forced herself to walk away without responding. She had been raised to take the high road, even when others chose to walk in the gutter. Her work performance continued to exceed expectations. Sarah had a natural gift for customer service, combining technical knowledge with genuine empathy that clients appreciated. She consistently received the highest satisfaction ratings on customer surveys and had already resolved several complaints that other representatives had been unable to handle. Janet, her supervisor, pulled her aside on Wednesday afternoon with a conflicted expression. "Sarah, I need to speak with you about something," she said, closing her office door behind them. "Is there a problem with my work?" Sarah asked, though she already knew her performance wasn't the issue. Janet sighed heavily. "Your work is excellent. Actually, it's some of the best I've seen from a new employee. But I'm getting pressure from upper management about your appearance, specifically your facial tattoo." Sarah's heart sank, but she kept her voice steady. "Has any client complained about me?" "Well, no," Janet admitted. "In fact, your customer feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. But there are concerns about how it reflects on the company's image." "What kind of concerns?" Janet looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Henderson has very traditional views about workplace appearance. The company handbook does mention maintaining a professional image, and some people feel that facial tattoos don't align with that standard." Sarah felt a surge of frustration. "The handbook doesn't specifically prohibit tattoos. I checked before I applied for this position. You're right, it doesn't, but it's open to interpretation." Janet paused, clearly struggling with the conversation. "Look, Sarah, I want to be honest with you. I think you're talented and dedicated, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that this might become a bigger issue." That evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment staring at herself in the bathroom mirror. The hummingbird tattoo seemed to stare back at her, its delicate wings forever frozen in flight. She touched it gently, remembering the day she had gotten it done. Her grandmother, Elena Martinez, had been the strongest woman Sarah had ever known. She worked 2 jobs to support Sarah after her parents' death, never once complaining about the sudden responsibility of raising a teenager. Elena had taught her that dignity came from within, not from what others thought of your appearance. Mija, her grandmother used to say, people will always find something to judge you for. Your skin color, your accent, your clothes, where you live. You cannot control their thoughts, but you can control your actions. Show them who you are through what you do, not how you look. The memory strengthened Sarah's resolve. She would not let their prejudice drive her away from a job she was good at and needed. Thursday brought a new challenge. Mr. Henderson had scheduled a staff meeting for the entire customer service department. Sarah arrived early and took a seat in the middle of the conference room, determined not to hide in the back corner. When Mr. Henderson entered the room, his presence immediately commanded attention. He was tall and imposing, with the kind of bearing that spoke of decades in leadership positions. His steel gray eyes scanned the room as he took his place at the head of the conference table. "Good morning, everyone," he began in a crisp, authoritative voice. "I wanted to discuss our quarterly performance metrics and address some concerns that have been brought to my attention." Sarah felt every muscle in her body tense as his gaze swept across the room and briefly paused on her. His expression remained neutral, but she was certain he had noticed her tattoo. Mr. Henderson continued his presentation, discussing client retention rates, response times, and customer satisfaction scores. When he reached the individual performance metrics, Sarah was surprised to hear her name mentioned. Sarah Martinez has achieved the highest customer satisfaction ratings in the department during her first 2 weeks. Her average call resolution time is 30% faster than our department standard, and she's successfully handled several escalated complaints that had been pending for weeks. Sarah felt a flush of pride, but it was tempered by the uncomfortable shifting she noticed among her colleagues. Their expressions ranged from surprise to outright annoyance that the woman they had been gossiping about was actually excelling at the job they questioned her ability to perform. After the meeting, as employees filed out of the conference room, Mr. Henderson's voice stopped Sarah at the door. "Ms. Martinez, could you stay behind for a moment?" Sarah's stomach dropped. This was it, the conversation she had been dreading since her first day. She turned around to face him, steeling herself for what she was certain would be a discussion about her unprofessional appearance. Mr. Henderson waited until the room was empty before speaking. His expression was unreadable as he studied her face, his eyes clearly taking in the hummingbird tattoo. "Tell me about your background," he said finally. The request caught Sarah off guard. She had expected immediate criticism or a lecture about company image. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in learning about her. "I have a degree in business administration from State University," she began carefully. "I worked for 3 years at Community Outreach Services before coming here. I specialized in financial counseling for low-income families." "Why did you leave?" "The nonprofit was wonderful, but the pay wasn't enough to cover my student loans and living expenses in the city." Mr. Henderson nodded thoughtfully. "What about your tattoo? I'm sure you're aware it's been a topic of conversation around the office." Sarah took a deep breath, knowing this moment could determine her future at the company. "It's a tribute to my grandmother who raised me after my parents died. She always said hummingbirds were messengers between worlds, connecting us to those we've lost." She watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of judgment or dismissal.
Instead, she saw something unexpected, a flash of understanding, perhaps even respect. "Family is important," he said quietly.
"Honoring those who shaped us shows character." The response was not what Sarah had anticipated, and she felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps this conversation might not end with her termination after all. The conversation with Mr. Henderson had left Sarah feeling cautiously optimistic, but her daily experience at the office remained unchanged. If anything, her colleagues' treatment of her had grown worse after the staff meeting where her performance was publicly praised. During lunch on Friday, Sarah overheard a particularly cruel conversation in the break room. She had gone to retrieve her lunch from the refrigerator when she heard voices from around the corner where several employees were eating. "I can't believe Henderson praised her in front of everyone," Michelle complained. "Just because she can answer phones doesn't mean she belongs here. What happens when we have the annual client appreciation dinner? Are we supposed to hide her in the back office? Maybe that's exactly what they'll do. laughed Brad. Can you imagine Mrs. Worthington's face if she saw that tattoo? She'd probably pull all her accounts immediately. Tom from accounting joined in with his own commentary. I heard she got it in prison. That's probably where she learned to be so good at dealing with difficult people. Sarah felt her hands shake with a mixture of anger and hurt. The prison comment was not only completely false but devastatingly hurtful. Her grandmother had raised her to be honest, hardworking, and law-abiding. The idea that people would make up such stories about her character based solely on her appearance was almost too much to bear. That's ridiculous, came an unexpected voice. Sarah recognized it as belonging to Marcus, a newer employee in the processing department who had always been polite to her. You don't know anything about her background. Maybe you should try actually talking to her instead of making up stories. Oh, come on, Marcus, Michelle replied. You can't tell me you think facial tattoos are appropriate in a professional environment. There are standards for a reason, yeah, and those standards are based on actual job performance, not your personal opinions about someone's appearance, Marcus shot back. Sarah felt grateful for his defense but also embarrassed that she needed defending at all. She quietly retrieved her lunch and slipped out of the break room without being noticed, her appetite completely gone. That afternoon brought an unexpected challenge. Mrs. Dorothy Worthington, one of the firm's most important clients, called with a complex issue regarding her investment portfolio. She was known for being demanding and had made several representatives cry during previous interactions. Sarah answered the call with her usual professional warmth. Good afternoon, Mrs. Worthington. This is Sarah Martinez. How can I assist you today? I need to speak with someone competent about my account, Mrs. Worthington snapped. I've been transferred 3 times already and no one seems to understand what I'm asking for. I'm sorry you've had that experience. Let me pull up your account and see how I can help you today. For the next 45 minutes, Sarah patiently worked through Mrs. Worthington's concerns. The elderly woman's portfolio had been affected by recent market changes, and she was worried about her retirement security. Sarah not only addressed her immediate questions but also took the time to explain the market fluctuations in terms Mrs. Worthington could understand. You know, Mrs. Worthington said toward the end of the call, her tone much warmer than when she had started. You're the first person who's actually listened to what I was asking. Most of you young people just try to rush me off the phone. Your concerns are completely valid, Mrs. Worthington. Market volatility can be scary, especially when it affects your retirement plans. I want to make sure you feel confident about your portfolio. Well, you've certainly done that. What did you say your name was again? Sarah Martinez. I'll remember that name. You're the kind of employee Mr. Henderson should be promoting, not hiding away answering phones. After Mrs. Worthington hung up, Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. This was why she loved customer service, the ability to turn someone's frustration into confidence and satisfaction. Her personal appearance had never once affected her ability to help clients, and this call proved it once again. The following Monday brought news that would change everything. Janet called Sarah into her office first thing in the morning, and her supervisor looked unusually nervous. Sarah, I have some news. Mrs. Worthington called Mr. Henderson directly over the weekend to praise your service. Apparently, she was so impressed that she's referring 3 new clients to our firm specifically because of how you handled her account. Sarah felt a swell of pride but noticed Janet seemed troubled rather than pleased. That's wonderful news, Sarah said cautiously. Is there a problem? Janet sighed. The problem is that Mrs. Worthington specifically requested that you handle her account going forward. She wants to meet with you in person next week to discuss expanding her investment portfolio. The implication hit Sarah immediately. An in-person meeting meant Mrs. Worthington would see her facial tattoo. Given the woman's age and the firm's concerns about client reactions, this could be the moment that ended Sarah's employment. What did Mr. Henderson say? Sarah asked quietly. He wants to see you in his office at 2 o'clock today. The hours until the appointment crawled by slowly. Sarah threw herself into her work, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting would determine her fate at Henderson Financial Services. Every possible scenario played through her mind, from immediate termination to being transferred to a position with no client contact. At exactly 2 o'clock, Sarah knocked on Mr. Henderson's office door. His secretary waved her in, and Sarah found herself face to face with the man who held her professional future in his hands. Please, sit down, Ms. Martinez, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Sarah sat down, her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. She had decided to face whatever was coming with dignity. Mrs. Worthington spoke very highly of you, Mr. Henderson began. She said you were the most competent and caring representative she's dealt with in 30 years of doing business with us. I'm glad I could help her, Sarah replied simply. She wants to meet with you next week to discuss a significant expansion of her portfolio. This could mean substantial revenue for the firm. He paused, studying Sarah's face. She also wants to bring her son and daughter-in-law to the meeting. They'll be making investment decisions for their own accounts based on how this meeting goes. Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of the situation. I'm sure you're aware that this presents a challenge, Mr. Henderson continued. Mrs. Worthington is from a very traditional background. Her family has been with this firm for 3 decades. They have certain expectations about the people they do business with. I understand, Sarah said, though her heart was breaking. Mr. Henderson leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. The question is, what do we do about it? The way he phrased it gave Sarah a flicker of hope. He hadn't said the meeting was impossible or that she would be removed from the account. Instead, he seemed to be genuinely considering how to handle the situation. I could meet with them, Sarah said carefully. Let my work speak for itself. You could, he agreed. But are you prepared for the possibility that they might have a negative reaction to your appearance? Sarah thought of her grandmother, of the strength Elena had shown in the face of prejudice throughout her life. I've dealt with negative reactions before. Mr. Henderson, what matters to me is doing right by the clients and the company. Something shifted in Mr. Henderson's expression, a look of respect, perhaps even admiration. That's exactly the attitude I hoped you'd have, he said, because I've decided you're going to handle that meeting. The news that Sarah would be handling the Worthington meeting sent shockwaves through the office. By Tuesday morning, everyone seemed to know about Mr. Henderson's decision, and the reactions ranged from disbelief to outright hostility. He's lost his mind, Sarah overheard Michelle telling a group of coworkers near the copy machine. When Mrs. Worthington sees that tattoo, she'll not only pull her accounts but probably sue us for emotional distress. Brad from marketing was even more vocal in his criticism. During the morning coffee break, he made no effort to lower his voice when discussing the situation. This is going to be a disaster. Henderson is risking our biggest client relationship just to prove some point about political correctness. When this blows up, we'll all pay the price. Even some employees who had previously remained neutral began expressing concerns. The pressure and gossip created an atmosphere of tension that followed Sarah wherever she went in the office. Janet tried to be supportive, but Sarah could see the worry in her supervisor's eyes. During their preparation meeting for the Worthington appointment, Janet went over every possible detail multiple times. Make sure you have all the portfolio documents organized perfectly, Janet said, checking items off a lengthy list. Have backup copies of everything. Double-check all the calculations. Review Mrs. Worthington's investment history one more time. Janet, Sarah said gently, I've prepared for difficult client meetings before. I know what I'm doing. Janet looked up from her list with a stressed expression. I know you do, but this isn't just any client meeting. If this goes badly... She didn't finish the sentence, but Sarah understood the implication. Her job, and possibly Janet's, could be on the line. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon in the firm's elegant conference room. As the day approached, Sarah found herself becoming the subject of increasingly bold commentary from her colleagues. Some made snide remarks within earshot, while others simply stared and shook their heads when she passed by. On Thursday evening, Sarah stayed late at the office to make final preparations. She was alone in the conference room arranging materials and reviewing her presentation when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Mr. Henderson appeared in the doorway. Working late? He asked, stepping into the room. Just making sure everything is perfect for tomorrow, Sarah replied, looking up from the documents she was organizing. Mr. Henderson walked over to the windows that overlooked the city skyline. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. For several moments he stood quietly, seemingly lost in thought. You know, he said finally, 25 years ago, I was in a very different place than I am now. Sarah wasn't sure if she should respond or simply listen. I was a young Marine Corps officer, fresh out of training and eager to prove myself. I thought I knew everything about leadership, about judgment, about what made people worthy of respect. He turned from the window to face her directly. I learned some hard lessons about the difference between appearance and character, about how wrong first impressions can be. There was something in his voice that suggested he was sharing more than just general wisdom. Sarah sensed he was telling her something important, though she wasn't sure exactly what. Tomorrow is going to be challenging, he continued. Mrs. Worthington and her family are good people, but they come from a world where certain expectations about appearance are deeply ingrained. They may react poorly at first. I understand that, Sarah said. I'm prepared for it. Are you? Because once you walk into that room, there's no going back. Their first reaction might be shock, even disgust. They might demand to speak with someone else. They might threaten to take their business elsewhere. Sarah felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her voice steady. And if they do? Then you'll have an opportunity to show them who you really are, beyond what they see on the surface. The question is, are you strong enough to stay professional and composed while they judge you for something that has nothing to do with your ability to help them? Sarah thought of her grandmother's teachings about dignity in the face of prejudice. My grandmother faced discrimination her whole life because of her accent and her background. She taught me that you can't control how people see you, but you can control how you respond to their treatment. Mr. Henderson nodded approvingly. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was the strongest person I ever knew. This tattoo represents her spirit, her memory. I won't be ashamed of honoring her no matter how others react. Good, Mr. Henderson said firmly, because tomorrow you're going to need every bit of that strength. Friday morning arrived with an unusual energy in the office. Word had spread about the afternoon meeting, and Sarah could feel the anticipation and anxiety from her colleagues. Some seemed excited about the possibility of drama, while others appeared genuinely concerned about the firm's reputation. Marcus from the processing department stopped by Sarah's desk around lunchtime. Hey, he said quietly. I just wanted to say good luck this afternoon. I think what you're doing is brave. Thank you, Sarah replied, touched by his support. I appreciate that. For what it's worth, I think Henderson made the right choice. You're the best person for this job, regardless of what you look like. His words gave Sarah a boost of confidence she desperately needed. As the afternoon approached, her nerves began to intensify, but she forced herself to focus on the task at hand, rather than the potential reactions she might face. At 2:30, Sarah made her way to the conference room. She had chosen her most professional outfit, a navy blue blazer and matching skirt with minimal jewelry and perfectly styled hair. The hummingbird tattoo stood out against her skin, impossible to hide but somehow seeming less prominent when paired with her confident bearing. Mr. Henderson was already in the conference room when she arrived, along with Janet and another senior staff member. He gave her an encouraging nod as she took her place at the table. Mrs. Worthington and her family should be arriving shortly, he said. Remember, let your expertise speak for itself. At exactly 3 o'clock, the receptionist called to announce that the Worthington party had arrived. Sarah took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and prepared to face whatever reaction awaited her. The conference room door opened, and Mrs. Worthington entered first. She was an elegant woman in her 70s, impeccably dressed and carrying herself with the confidence that comes from decades of social prominence. Behind her came a middle-aged man and woman who were clearly her son and daughter-in-law. Mrs. Worthington's eyes immediately found Sarah, and her expression froze. The shock was unmistakable as she took in the facial tattoo, her mouth opening slightly in surprise. Her son and daughter-in-law noticed her reaction and followed her gaze, their own faces showing similar astonishment. The silence in the room stretched for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. Sarah stood up, extending her hand with a warm, professional smile. Mrs. Worthington, it's wonderful to meet you in person. I'm Sarah Martinez, and I'm looking forward to discussing your portfolio expansion today. Mrs. Worthington stared at Sarah's outstretched hand, then slowly looked back up at her face. The elderly woman's expression was unreadable, and Sarah felt her heart pounding as she waited to see if the meeting would end before it had even begun. The tension in the conference room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mrs. Worthington continued to stare at Sarah's tattoo, her expression a mixture of shock and confusion. Her son, Robert, stepped forward with a disapproving frown. "Excuse me," Robert said, his voice carrying the entitled tone of someone accustomed to getting his way. "There must be some mistake. We were expecting to meet with a senior financial advisor, not... He gestured vaguely at Sarah, unable to finish his sentence. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she maintained her professional composure. I'm the representative who has been handling your mother's account, Mr. Worthington. I've prepared a comprehensive review of her portfolio and recommendations for expansion. Robert's wife, Patricia, whispered something in his ear while shooting disgusted looks at Sarah's tattoo. Robert nodded and turned to Mr. Henderson. This is completely unacceptable, he declared. We're talking about substantial investments here. My mother deserves to work with someone who understands the importance of maintaining professional standards. Mr. Henderson started to respond, but Mrs. Worthington raised her hand to silence her son. The elderly woman had been studying Sarah intently throughout the exchange, and now she stepped closer. You're the young woman I spoke with on the phone, she said slowly. Yes, ma'am. You called about concerns regarding market volatility and its impact on your retirement portfolio. Mrs. Worthington nodded thoughtfully. You spent nearly an hour explaining things to me. You were patient, knowledgeable, and you actually listened to what I was saying. Your concerns were completely valid, Mrs. Worthington. I wanted to make sure you felt confident about your financial security. The room fell silent as Mrs. Worthington continued to study Sarah's face. Robert and Patricia exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly expecting their matriarch to demand a different representative. That's an interesting tattoo, Mrs. Worthington said finally. What does it represent? Sarah's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment that could make or break, not just the meeting, but potentially her entire career at Henderson Financial Services. It's a hummingbird, Mrs. Worthington. It represents my grandmother who raised me after my parents died. She always said hummingbirds were messengers between worlds, connecting us to those we've lost. Getting this tattoo was my way of keeping her memory and her strength with me always. Mrs. Worthington's expression softened slightly. Your grandmother raised you? Yes, ma'am. From the time I was 12 until she passed away 2 years ago. She worked 2 jobs to put me through college and taught me everything I know about treating people with dignity and respect. Robert cleared his throat impatiently. Mother, this is all very touching, but we have important financial matters to discuss. Perhaps we should request a different advisor. Mrs. Worthington shot her son a look that could have frozen fire. Robert, you will sit down and be quiet. This young woman earned my respect with her competence, not her appearance. She turned back to Sarah with renewed interest. Tell me more about your grandmother. For the next few minutes, Sarah shared stories about Elena Martinez, her work ethic, her wisdom, her determination to give Sarah every opportunity for success. Mrs. Worthington listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and nodding with understanding. She sounds like a remarkable woman, Mrs. Worthington said when Sarah finished. The kind of person who shapes character through example rather than lectures. She was exactly that, Sarah agreed, feeling tears prick at her eyes. Mrs. Worthington straightened up and looked around the room at the assembled faces. Well then, shall we discuss my investments? I believe Ms. Martinez has prepared a presentation for us. Robert and Patricia looked stunned, but they reluctantly took their seats at the conference table. Mr. Henderson and Janet exchanged surprised glances, clearly not having expected this turn of events. Sarah opened her portfolio and began her presentation. She had spent hours preparing detailed analyses of Mrs. Worthington's current investments, market trends, and recommendations for portfolio expansion. Her voice grew stronger and more confident as she moved through the material, her expertise evident in every explanation. Based on your risk tolerance and long-term goals, Sarah explained, pointing to charts and graphs, I recommend diversifying into these 3 sectors while maintaining your core holdings in blue-chip stocks and government bonds. Mrs. Worthington asked sharp, intelligent questions that demonstrated her deep understanding of financial matters. Sarah answered each one thoroughly, providing additional context and alternative strategies when appropriate. Even Robert and Patricia began to pay attention as Sarah's presentation continued. Despite their initial prejudices, they couldn't ignore her obvious competence in the thoughtful way she addressed their concerns about market volatility and inheritance planning. What about international exposure? Robert asked grudgingly. Excellent question, Sarah replied, flipping to a section specifically addressing global diversification. I recommend a conservative 15% allocation to international markets, focusing on developed economies with stable currencies. This provides growth potential while managing currency risk. She walked them through specific fund recommendations, explaining the reasoning behind each choice and how they fit into the overall portfolio strategy. Patricia found herself leaning forward, genuinely interested in the tax implications of different investment vehicles. "You've clearly done your homework," Mrs. Worthington said approvingly. "This is exactly the kind of thorough analysis I was hoping for." The meeting that was supposed to last an hour stretched to nearly 2 hours as the family became increasingly engaged with Sarah's recommendations. By the end, even Robert was asking for her business card and inquiring about setting up his own portfolio review. "Ms. Martinez," Mrs. Worthington said as the meeting concluded, "I want you to implement these recommendations immediately, and I'd like to schedule quarterly reviews going forward." "I'll have the paperwork prepared by Monday," Sarah replied, feeling a surge of professional satisfaction. As the Worthington family prepared to leave, Mrs. Worthington paused at the door and turned back to Sarah. "You know, dear, I've been doing business with this firm for 30 years. I've worked with a dozen different advisors, and most of them treated me like a foolish old woman who didn't understand money." She glanced at her son and daughter-in-law, who looked appropriately chastened. "You treated me like an intelligent person whose concerns mattered. That means more to me than you know." After the family left, the conference room fell silent. Mr. Henderson looked at Sarah with unmistakable pride, while Janet seemed barely able to contain her relief and excitement. "Outstanding work," Mr. Henderson said simply. "That was exactly the kind of professionalism and expertise this firm is built on." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had been carrying since her first day at Henderson Financial Services. She had proven herself not through hiding who she was, but by demonstrating her competence while being authentically herself. Word of the successful meeting spread quickly through the office. By Monday morning, the atmosphere around Sarah had shifted dramatically. The whispered conversations and judgmental stares were replaced by grudging respect and even genuine curiosity from some colleagues. Marcus stopped by her desk with a huge grin. "I heard Mrs. Worthington is referring 2 more clients specifically to you. That's incredible." Even some of the employees who had been most critical began to change their tune. Michelle from processing actually approached Sarah in the break room to ask about her investment strategies. "I have to admit," Michelle said somewhat sheepishly, "I was wrong about you. What you did with the Worthington account was impressive." Sarah accepted the apology graciously, though she couldn't help but feel that it was unfortunate it had taken a public demonstration of her abilities to earn basic respect from her colleagues. The real surprise came on Wednesday when Mr. Henderson called Sarah into his office again. This time, his demeanor was completely different from their previous meetings. He seemed relaxed, almost pleased. "Ms. Martinez, I have some news. Mrs. Worthington has referred 3 new high-net-worth clients to our firm, and they've all specifically requested to work with you." Sarah felt her eyes widen in surprise. "3 new clients?" "Major accounts," Mr. Henderson confirmed. "We're talking about several $1,000,000 in assets under management. This could be a career-defining opportunity for you." The success was overwhelming, but Sarah found herself thinking about something beyond the professional triumph. She had faced down prejudice and proven that character and competence mattered more than appearance, but she wondered if the lesson had really been learned by everyone around her. That question would be answered sooner than she expected, in a way that would shock everyone at Henderson Financial Services. The following Thursday brought an unexpected visitor to Henderson Financial Services. Sarah was at her desk reviewing client portfolios when Linda from reception called to announce that a distinguished gentleman was asking to speak with Mr. Henderson about military veteran employment opportunities. "He says his name is Colonel James Mitchell, retired Marine Corps," Linda explained over the phone. "He's here about some kind of veteran outreach program." Sarah looked up from her work as a tall, distinguished man in his 60s walked through the office toward Mr. Henderson's corner suite. He carried himself with unmistakable military bearing, straight shoulders, confident stride, and alert eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, and his expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he was clearly in excellent physical condition. As Colonel Mitchell passed through the customer service area, several employees glanced up from their desks. Brad from marketing actually stood up to get a better look at the impressive visitor, while Michelle and Tom whispered to each other about who he might be. Sarah returned to her work, but she couldn't help overhearing fragments of conversation from nearby desks. Her colleagues seemed fascinated by the military visitor, speculating about why he was meeting with Mr. Henderson. Probably some kind of charity thing, she heard Michelle say. Rich guys love those military causes. About an hour later, Sarah noticed Mr. Henderson and Colonel Mitchell walking through the office together. Mr. Henderson was giving him a tour, pointing out different departments and explaining the firm's operations. When they reached the customer service area, both men paused near Sarah's desk. "This is our customer service department," Mr. Henderson was explaining. "We pride ourselves on maintaining the highest standards of client care and professional excellence." Colonel Mitchell nodded approvingly as his eyes scanned the area. When his gaze fell on Sarah, she saw him notice her facial tattoo immediately. His expression remained neutral, but she detected a subtle shift in his attention. "Ms. Martinez," Mr. Henderson called. "Could you join us for a moment?" Sarah stood up, smoothing her skirt nervously. She had no idea why she was being called over, but she approached the two men with professional composure. "Colonel Mitchell, this is Sarah Martinez, one of our top customer service representatives," Mr. Henderson said. "Sarah, Colonel Mitchell is a retired Marine Corps officer who's working with local businesses on veteran employment initiatives." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Colonel," Sarah said, extending her hand. Colonel Mitchell shook her hand firmly, his keen eyes studying her face with undisguised interest. "Ms. Martinez," he said in a gravelly voice that spoke of decades of command experience. "That's an interesting tattoo you have there." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Even after her success with the Worthington account, she still braced herself for negative reactions to her appearance. "Thank you, sir. It's a tribute to my grandmother." "A hummingbird," he observed. "What's the significance?" "My grandmother always said hummingbirds were messengers between worlds, connecting us to those we've lost. She raised me after my parents died, and this helps me keep her memory close." Colonel Mitchell continued to study the tattoo with what appeared to be professional interest rather than judgment. "It's beautifully done. The detail work is exceptional." The comment surprised Sarah. Most people either criticized the tattoo or politely ignored it. Colonel Mitchell seemed to be evaluating it from an artistic perspective. Mr. Henderson looked pleased with the exchange. "Sarah has been with us for several weeks now, and has already established herself as one of our most capable representatives. She recently handled a very challenging client situation with outstanding results. Is that so?" Colonel Mitchell asked, his attention fully focused on Sarah now. "What kind of situation?" Sarah felt uncomfortable being put on the spot, but she answered honestly. "A long-standing client had concerns about market volatility affecting her retirement portfolio. We worked through her options and developed a strategy that addressed her security needs while maintaining growth potential. And the outcome? She expanded her portfolio significantly and has referred 3 new clients to the firm." Colonel Mitchell smiled for the first time since Sarah had met him. "Excellent work. That kind of client relationship building is exactly what separates good representatives from great ons." He turned to Mr. Henderson. "You mentioned you've been working on diversifying your hiring practices. Ms. Martinez here seems like exactly the kind of talented professional you want to attract." "Absolutely," Mr. Henderson agreed. "We believe in hiring based on merit and potential, regardless of background or appearance." Sarah noticed several of her colleagues had stopped working to listen to the conversation. Brad and Michelle were within earshot, and she could see the confusion on their faces. They clearly hadn't expected the distinguished military officer to respond so positively to her tattoo. "Well," Colonel Mitchell said, "I appreciate you taking the time to show me around. Mr. Henderson, your firm seems to have its priorities in the right place." After the two men moved on to continue the tour, Sarah returned to her desk feeling somewhat puzzled by the interaction. Colonel Mitchell's reaction to her tattoo had been completely different from what she had expected. Instead of disapproval or shock, he had seemed almost interested. The mystery deepened later that afternoon when Linda from reception called Sarah's desk directly. "Sarah, Colonel Mitchell asked if he could speak with you privately before he leaves. He's in the small conference room near Mr. Henderson's office." Sarah's heart rate picked up as she made her way to the conference room. She couldn't imagine what a retired Marine Corps colonel would want to discuss with her privately. When she knocked on the door, His deep voice called for her to enter. Colonel Mitchell was standing by the window looking out at the city skyline. When he turned to face her, his expression was serious but not unfriendly. "Please, sit down, Miss Martinez," he said, gesturing to a chair at the small conference table. Sarah sat down, her hands folded in her lap, waiting for him to explain why he had requested this meeting. "I want to talk to you about your tattoo," he said directly. Sarah's heart sank. Despite his earlier positive comments, she wondered if he was about to lecture her about professional appearance or suggest she consider having it removed. "Sir," she said carefully. Colonel Mitchell moved away from the window and took a seat across from her. "The artwork is exceptional quality. The shading, the detail work, the color gradients, whoever did that piece is a true artist." Sarah blinked in surprise. This was definitely not the conversation she had expected. "Where did you have it done?" he continued. "There's a shop downtown called Sacred Art. The artist's name is Miguel Hernandez. He specialized in memorial pieces." Colonel Mitchell nodded approvingly. "Miguel does beautiful work. I'm familiar with his portfolio." The comment left Sarah completely bewildered. How would a retired Marine Corps colonel know about a tattoo artist's portfolio? "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't understand." Colonel Mitchell smiled, and for the first time since she had met him, his formal military bearing relaxed slightly. "Ms. Martinez, what I'm about to show you stays between us for now. I have my reasons for keeping this private." He stood up and walked to the conference room door, checking to make sure it was securely closed. Then he returned to his seat and began rolling up the sleeve of his expensive dress shirt. Sarah watched in growing amazement as intricate tattoo work was revealed on his forearm. The design was a complex military scene featuring an eagle, perched on a globe and anchor, the Marine Corps emblem, surrounded by names and dates that were clearly tributes to fallen comrades. "Miguel did this piece for me 3 years ago," Colonel Mitchell said quietly. "Every name on here represents a Marine who didn't make it home. Just like your hummingbird represents your grandmother. This is how I honor their sacrifice." Sarah stared at the beautiful, meaningful artwork covering the colonel's arm. The detail work was indeed exceptional, and the emotional significance was unmistakable. "I had no idea," she whispered. "Most people don't," he replied, carefully rolling his sleeve back down. "In my professional world, tattoos are still seen as inappropriate, even unprofessional. I've spent my entire career hiding this part of myself." He looked directly at Sarah, his expression intense. "But you wear your tribute proudly despite the judgment and discrimination you face. That takes a kind of courage that most people don't possess." Sarah felt overwhelmed by Colonel Mitchell's revelation. The idea that this distinguished military officer had been hiding his own meaningful tattoo, while she faced daily judgment for hers, created a complex mix of emotions. "Colonel, why are you telling me this?" she asked softly. He studied her face for a long moment before answering. "Because I've spent 30 years in the military watching talented people be judged for superficial reasons, instead of their character and capabilities. I've seen good soldiers passed over for promotion because of tattoos, even when those tattoos represented their deepest values and most meaningful experiences." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "And because what I witnessed in your office today made me realize it's time to stop hiding who I am." "I don't understand." Colonel Mitchell stood up and walked to the conference room window again. "I heard some of your colleagues talking while your boss was showing me around. Comments about your tattoo, speculation about your background, suggestions that you don't belong in a professional environment." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." "Don't apologize," he said firmly, turning back to face her. "You have nothing to be sorry for. They should be ashamed of their ignorance and prejudice." He sat back down across from her, his military bearing returning as he spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to command. "Ms. Martinez, I want you to know something. I've worked with thousands of Marines over the course of my career. I can recognize strength, integrity, and character when I see it. You possess all 3 qualities in abundance." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. After weeks of judgment and whispered criticism from her colleagues, hearing these words from such a respected figure was almost overwhelming. "The way you handled yourself during our conversation earlier, the respect you showed while discussing your grandmother's memory, the professionalism you've maintained despite the discrimination you face, these are the qualities that make exceptional employees and outstanding human beings." Colonel Mitchell reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. I'm working with several major corporations on veteran employment initiatives, but my real mission is broader than that. I'm trying to help businesses understand that diversity includes people who express their values and experiences in ways that might not fit traditional corporate expectations. He handed her the card. I want to offer you a position with my consulting firm. We work with high net worth individuals and corporations on investment strategies and organizational development. Your skills would be valued and your appearance would never be an issue. Sarah stared at the elegant business card, her mind racing. The offer was tempting, a chance to work in an environment where she wouldn't face daily judgment, where her tattoo would be accepted rather than tolerated. That's an incredibly generous offer, Colonel, but I'm not sure I'm ready to leave Henderson Financial Services. Despite the challenges, I've been successful here. Colonel Mitchell smiled approvingly. That's exactly the answer I hoped you'd give. You're not running away from adversity. You're facing it head-on and changing minds through your actions. He stood up again, his expression taking on a determined quality. But I think it's time your colleagues learned something about the courage it takes to honor your values publicly. What do you mean? I mean, it's time for me to stop hiding my own story. Colonel Mitchell walked to the conference room door and opened it, stepping into the hallway. Sarah followed, confused about what he intended to do. Mr. Henderson, he called out loudly enough for everyone in the nearby offices to hear. Could you gather your staff in the main conference room? I'd like to address them about something important. Within minutes, employees from throughout the office had assembled in the large conference room. Sarah found herself sitting in the front row, still uncertain about what Colonel Mitchell was planning. Mr. Henderson introduced him to the gathered staff. Colonel Mitchell is a distinguished veteran who's been working with us on employment diversity initiatives. He'd like to share some thoughts with you. Colonel Mitchell stood at the front of the room, his commanding presence immediately capturing everyone's attention. Sarah noticed Brad, Michelle, and Tom sitting near the back, looking curious about what the impressive military officer might have to say. Thank you all for taking time from your work, Colonel Mitchell began. I want to talk to you about something that affects every workplace in America, the difference between appearance and character. He paused, his eyes scanning the assembled faces. I've had the privilege of serving with some of the finest men and women in our armed forces. I've learned that courage, integrity, and competence come in many different forms. Sarah watched as her colleagues nodded approvingly, clearly impressed by the colonel's words and military bearing. I've also learned that our assumptions about people, based on their appearance, are often completely wrong. Colonel Mitchell began rolling up his sleeve as he spoke. For 30 years, I've hidden a part of myself because I was afraid of how others might judge me. I was concerned that people would see my tattoos and assume I was unprofessional, unreliable, or inappropriate for positions of responsibility. Gasps echoed through the room as the intricate memorial tattoo on his forearm was revealed. Sarah heard someone in the back row whisper, "Oh my God." This tattoo represents the most sacred part of my military service, he continued, his voice carrying deep emotion. Every name here belongs to a Marine who gave their life for this country. Wearing their memory on my skin is how I honor their sacrifice. The room had fallen completely silent. Sarah could see the shock and confusion on her colleagues' faces as they tried to reconcile the distinguished officer they respected with the extensive tattoo work he was displaying. But I've been a coward. Colonel Mitchell continued. I've hidden this part of myself while watching other people face discrimination for expressing their values and experiences through body art. His eyes found Sarah in the front row. Today I met someone who has the courage I've lacked. Miss Martinez wears a tribute to her grandmother proudly. Despite facing judgment and prejudice from people who should know better, he turned to address the entire room directly. I've heard some of you questioning whether she belongs in a professional environment because of her facial tattoo. Let me be clear. Anyone who judges competence based on appearance is demonstrating their own lack of professional judgment. Brad and Michelle looked mortified, clearly realizing their comments had been overheard and were now being addressed publicly. Ms. Martinez has proven her excellence through her work with clients, her knowledge of financial products, and her dedication to this firm. The fact that some of you have focused on her appearance instead of her performance says everything about your character and nothing about hers. The rebuke was delivered with military precision, and its impact was immediate. Several employees looked down at their hands while others glanced nervously at Sarah with expressions of shame. Colonel Mitchell wasn't finished. "I'm announcing today that Henderson Financial Services will be the first firm in the city to partner with my consulting company on a comprehensive diversity and inclusion initiative. We'll be working together to ensure that hiring, promotion, and workplace treatment are based solely on merit and performance." He looked directly at Mr. Henderson, who nodded his agreement enthusiastically. "And Ms. Martinez will be serving as our primary liaison for this initiative, in addition to her current responsibilities with high-net-worth clients." Sarah felt her heart race as she realized what Colonel Mitchell had just announced. Not only had he publicly defended her against the discrimination she had faced, but he had also essentially promoted her to a position of greater responsibility and visibility. "Excellence comes in many forms," Colonel Mitchell concluded. "True professionalism means recognizing and celebrating that diversity while focusing on what really matters: character, competence, and commitment to serving others." As the meeting ended and employees filed out of the conference room, the atmosphere in the office had fundamentally changed. Sarah noticed her colleagues looking at her with new respect, and several approached to offer congratulations on her new role. Marcus was the first to reach her, grinning broadly. "That was incredible. I can't believe Colonel Mitchell called everyone out like that." Even Michelle approached, looking genuinely apologetic. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. I was completely wrong about you, and I'm sorry for the things I said." Over the following weeks, the transformation in the office was remarkable. Sarah's tattoo went from being a source of whispered criticism to a symbol of the courage to be authentic while maintaining excellence. Her success with clients continued to grow, and her new role in the diversity initiative gave her a platform to help other employees who might face similar challenges. Colonel Mitchell became a regular visitor to the office, working with Sarah to develop programs that would help other businesses recognize talent, regardless of appearance. Their partnership proved that when people have the courage to show their true selves and others have the wisdom to look beyond surface judgments, everyone benefits. Sarah kept her grandmother's photo on her desk next to a thank you card from Mrs. Worthington. Every morning when she touched the hummingbird tattoo on her cheek, she remembered Elena's words about dignity and strength in the face of adversity. Her grandmother had been right. You can't control how people see you, but you can control how you respond to their treatment. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to stay true to yourself, you can even change their minds.